All right, I'm going to show you curves. Curves is actually the most professional way to adjust the values in your image. Okay, it's a little bit trickier than levels, and of course much trickier than brightness and contrast. So I'm just going to make this black and white. We know how to do that. La la la, da da da, la la la. Okay, now we're going to work with curves. Okay, curves. Okay, here's what we have with curves. We have a histogram, much like we did with levels, but we also have this weird line and this graph and all these sorts of things going on. Okay, well, with curves, this line represents the kind of bending that we're going to do, which is what gives curves its name, the kind of bending that we do to mess with our shadows, our midtones, and our highlights. Okay, so if you bend it down, okay, you're going to bring more shadows in there, okay? If you bend it up, you're going to get more highlights, okay? And it kind of depends on where you pick this point and maneuver it around. Now, it should have a natural curve to it, but see, if we really push it too crazy above this diagonal line that it gives you kind of like a set amount, it really kind of gets kind of nasty. It doesn't look so great. So you want to really be careful with it, okay? And you can create multiple points by clicking on that curved line and adjusting. Okay, now remember, I'm going to hit the reset button, okay? What's nice is we have some defaults in here. So we could just increase contrast, and then you can kind of take a look and see what it did to your line. Remember, this diagonal is where it was, and this is what it did. So it kind of pulled up some highlights a little bit, made a few dark areas. So if you go through these, okay, these presets, you can actually get a better feel for the kind of curve that you might be looking for. So if you want to make the image lighter, okay, maybe push the high keys a little bit, and then you're like, you know what, I want to push a little more high keys there. You can, push it just a little bit more. We're kind of blowing out some areas, kind of overexposing here. So we might have to, reset that and go back and take a look. And there's obviously some crazy fun things in here like negative. Whoa! Okay, so that kind of looks like what your negatives might look like. Hence the name negative, if this were a film image, old school film. So strong contrast, let's get something a little bit normal. Then there's all kinds of color negative ones, so that's what your color negative might look like. I wouldn't go too crazy in, oh, look at all these. Oh, you can mess around with all this. Okay, I wouldn't go and do these crazy things, okay? For the assignment, we're working in black and white. So I would just stick to some of these more normal ones, okay? But you can go ahead and adjust the curve, according to the way that you want, to make things look. Now this is very high contrast, really mess this up, but it kind of has a cool, some of the textures are kind of pulling on that. So I'm going to close this. I know that since I use my image adjustments, I can always double click on this, go back to it and adjust it, so on and so forth. Close this. But again, remember, if you layer things around, you can kind of see how it might, there's very little adjustment, very little at all. But, this kind of is a very high contrast image. I would say this would copy well in a photocopier because it's nice and high contrasted. So that's curves. It's definitely a little bit trickier. I would stick with, the presets just until you kind of get familiar with how it goes. I mean, I've messed around with curves a lot, adjusting photos, so I kind of have some go-to places where I like to mess around with it. But again, just take a look here in the bottom corner. You've got your shadows here in the middle areas, obviously your middle tones, and then your highlights are to the far right or the top. So that's kind of how that curve works. Okay, so good luck to you. And remember, save one as a PSD, save one as a JPEG, and ta-da.